Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. Today's story comes from a 31-year-old bloke from Manchester named Danny, and it's one that starts the way so many of these do, with hope, with possibility, with the kind of optimism that only comes when you're convinced you finally cracked the code to happiness. Danny thought he'd found the one, a beautiful Thai woman who made him feel alive again after years of grey skies and dead-end jobs back home. He thought marriage would be the beginning of his new life. Instead, it became a slow-motion nightmare that cost him nearly everything: his savings, his dignity, and almost his sanity. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you've ever fallen for someone who turned out to be playing a completely different game, hit that like button and subscribe, because Danny's story might just save you from making the same mistakes he did. Now, here's Danny's story in his own words. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't in a good place when I first booked that ticket to Thailand. 31 years old, living in a cramped flat in Salford, working tech support for a company that treated us like we were as replaceable as the equipment we fixed. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of rain against the window, drag myself to the bus stop, spend 8 hours in a grey cubicle helping people reset passwords and explaining for the 1000th time that yes, they need to actually turn the router off and on again. Then home, microwave dinner, telly, sleep, repeat. That was it. That was the life I'd built for myself. Or maybe the life that had built itself around me while I wasn't paying attention. It hadn't always been that grim. I used to have mates I'd go out with on weekends, a girlfriend I thought I'd marry someday, plans that extended beyond the next Netflix series. But Sarah left me 2 years before all this started. Said she needed someone with ambition, someone going places. She didn't say it outright, but I knew what she meant. Someone making more money, someone with prospects, someone who wasn't going to spend the rest of his life in tech support. She moved to London with a bloke who worked in finance, and I stayed in Manchester pretending I was fine. Told everyone it was mutual, that we'd grown apart. All the usual lies you tell when the truth is too humiliating to admit. After that, I stopped really trying, stopped going out as much, stopped swiping on the dating apps after a while, because every conversation felt like a job interview. I was failing. My mates started having kids, getting mortgages, moving to the suburbs. Our group chats went quiet. I'd see them maybe twice a year, and each time the gap between our lives felt wider. They'd talk about school catchment areas and mortgage rates, while I had nothing to contribute except stories about nightmare customers and the rising cost of my studio flat. I was lonely, mate. Not in the dramatic, crying into your pillow way, but in that modern way where you're surrounded by people and still completely isolated. You know what I mean? That's when the algorithm got me. I don't even remember what I was watching on YouTube that first time, probably something about digital nomads or remote work. But suddenly, my feed was full of videos about expats living in Thailand, blokes my age, some older, some younger, all talking about how they'd escaped the rat race back home and found paradise. Cheap rent, beautiful weather, friendly people, a cost of living so low that your pension or savings could stretch for decades. And the women. God, every video seemed to feature these relationships. Western men with Thai girlfriends who were gorgeous, attentive, traditional, in all the ways modern Western women supposedly weren't anymore. I know how that sounds now. I know it. But at the time, watching those videos in my depressing flat with the radiator banging and the rain coming down, it looked like the answer to everything. I started researching properly. Reddit forums, expat blogs, Facebook groups. Everyone had opinions, of course. Some people warning about scams and bar girls, others insisting they'd found genuine love and a better life. I told myself I was smart enough to avoid the pitfalls. I wasn't some desperate old man. I was only 31. I had skills. I could work remotely if I set it up right. This wasn't running away. It was making a strategic life change. That's what I told myself anyway. I booked 2 weeks in Pattaya for February. Figured I'd use some of my meagre holiday allowance to check it out, see if the reality matched the hype. If nothing else, I'd get some sun and a break from the Manchester winter that seemed to have lasted about 9 months that year. I didn't tell many people I was going. Told my mum I was going on a lad's holiday. Told my boss I needed to recharge. Didn't mention that I was going alone, that I was essentially conducting a reconnaissance mission for a possible future life. The flight itself felt like an escape. 13 hours from Manchester to Bangkok, then the bus down to Pattaya. I remember stepping out of the airport into that wall of heat and humidity and just breathing it in. Warm air. Actual warmth. No coat needed, no umbrella, just shorts and a t-shirt. And this feeling that I'd left something heavy behind in England. The taxi ride to my hotel took me along Beach Road, and I had my face pressed to the window like a kid. Neon signs, motorbikes everywhere, street food vendors, tourists stumbling between bars, and yeah, beautiful women everywhere you looked. I'd never been anywhere like it. The first few days, I did the typical tourist things. Walked along the beach, tried the street food, went to a few of the big nightlife spots that everyone talks about. Walking street was mental, absolute sensory overload. Music thumping from every direction. Girls outside every bar calling out to you, lights and noise and chaos. It was exciting, but also a bit much, if I'm honest. I felt like a mark everywhere I went. Like everyone could smell the newbie on me and was trying to work out how much money they could extract before I figured out the game. Then on my fifth night, I wandered down a side street looking for somewhere quieter, and I found this little bar that wasn't like the others. No loud music, no girls in bikinis dancing on poles, just a small open-air place with maybe 6 tables, a pool table in the corner, and a woman behind the bar who smiled at me without that calculating look I'd gotten used to. That was Ploy. She was 27, though I didn't know that at first. Slim, long, dark hair, wearing just jeans and a simple top, not the uniform of sequins and makeup that seemed standard everywhere else. When I sat at the bar, she asked what I wanted in English that was good, but not perfect, and there was something about her voice, her manner, that felt different, softer maybe, more genuine. I ordered a beer, and instead of immediately trying to get me to buy her a drink, or pushing me toward the more expensive options, she just served it and asked if it was my first time in Pattaya. We started talking. Properly talking, not the scripted conversation I'd had in other bars, where every question felt like it was leading somewhere transactional. She asked where I was from, what I did, how I was finding Thailand. I asked about her. She was from Isan originally, up northeast, but had been working in Pattaya for 3 years. She had family back home, a mother and 2 younger siblings she supported. The bar job was decent, she said, better than the factory work or farm work she'd done before. She wasn't complaining, just explaining her life in this matter-of-fact way that made me feel like I was actually getting to know a real person rather than a character performing a role. Here's the thing, and this is important. She didn't ask me for anything that night, didn't hint about needing money, didn't suggest I take her out after her shift, didn't give me her line ID without me asking. We just talked for a couple of hours while I nursed a few beers, and she served the handful of other customers who came and went. She laughed at my stories about terrible tech support calls. She told me about her nephew who wanted to be a footballer, normal stuff, human stuff. When I finally left to head back to my hotel, I felt like I'd made a friend rather than a transaction, and in Pattaya, that felt rare. I came back the next night, and the night after that. By the 4th visit, I'd stopped even pretending I was exploring other parts of the city. I'd spend my days at the beach or wandering around, but my evenings were at that bar, sitting at the same stool, talking to Ploy whenever she wasn't serving other customers. She started sitting with me during quiet periods, sharing stories about her life. She'd moved to Pattaya after her father died, left her with debts from his medical care. She sent money home every month to her mother and helped pay for her younger brother's schooling. Her sister was married to a Thai man who drank too much and didn't work enough. The family struggled, but she was doing what she could. I found myself wanting to help, but I held back because I'd read the warnings online. Don't be the ATM. Don't let them play on your sympathy. But Ploy never asked. That's what got me. She never made me feel like she was working me for money. When I offered to buy her dinner after her shift one night, she seemed genuinely surprised and pleased, not like she'd been waiting for me to make the offer. We went to a little seafood place down the road, nothing fancy, and she insisted on paying half until I convinced her to let me treat her. That night, walking back along the beach afterward, she took my hand, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. By the end of my 2 weeks, we'd become something more than friends. We'd spent almost every evening together. She'd taken me to places tourists didn't go, little markets where she'd translate for me, a temple where her family had connections, beaches outside the main tourist area where you could actually hear the waves over the music. She introduced me to her roommate, a girl who worked at a hotel, and they chatted in Thai while I sat there grinning like an idiot, happy just to be included. On my last night, we stayed up late at the beach, and she told me she'd miss me. I told her I'd miss her too, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. The flight back to Manchester was brutal. Back to the cold, back to the grey, back to the flat and the job and the endless bloody rain. But this time it felt different because I had something to look forward to. Someone who messaged me every morning and every night on Line app. Poi sent photos of her day, told me what she'd eaten, asked about my work. We'd video call when the time zones aligned, and seeing her face on my phone screen made that cramped flat feel a bit less suffocating. She made me feel like I mattered, like someone cared whether I'd had a good day or a bad one. Do you know how powerful that is when you've spent 2 years feeling invisible? Within a month of being back in Manchester, I was already planning my return. Not just a holiday this time. I was thinking bigger, longer, maybe permanent. I know that sounds mad. 4 weeks of messaging and video calls, and I was ready to upend my entire life. But you have to understand where my head was at. Every morning, I'd wake up to messages from Ploy. Good morning with a heart emoji. A photo of her breakfast, asking if I'd slept well. Every night before bed, we'd video call for an hour, sometimes 2. She'd show me around her apartment, introduce me to her cat, tell me about her day. It felt real in a way nothing had felt real in years. My job felt even more meaningless after having tasted something different. Sitting in that cubicle, listening to some angry customer shout about their internet connection while I stared at the grey walls and fluorescent lights, I'd think about Ploy sitting at that bar in the warm evening air, smiling at me over a beer. The contrast was painful. I started browsing remote work listings, figuring out if I could do tech support or IT troubleshooting from anywhere in the world. Turns out I could. Plenty of companies were going remote, especially after COVID had normalized everything. I just needed a decent internet connection and a laptop. The money conversations started small. Ploy never asked directly, that's what made it feel okay at the time. She'd mention in passing that her motorbike needed repairs, or that her mum's electricity bill had gone up, or that her brother needed money for school books. She wasn't crying poverty or making dramatic appeals, just sharing her life, the way you do with someone you're close to, and I'd offer to help. 100 quid here, 50 there. Through Western Union at first, then I set up a Thai bank account transfer app that made it easier. It felt good, honestly. It felt like I was doing something meaningful with money that otherwise would have just sat in my account losing value to inflation. By month 3, we were talking about me coming back. Not for a holiday, properly coming back. Ploy said she'd help me find an apartment, that we could live together, that she'd take care of me while I got settled. She painted this picture of what our life could be like. Beach days, exploring Thailand together, her cooking for me, building something real together, away from the pressure and greyness of the UK. My mum wasn't thrilled when I told her, but she didn't try too hard to stop me. I think she could see I was miserable, and figured maybe a change of scenery would help. She did ask the obvious questions though. Danny, are you sure about this girl? Do you really know her? What if it doesn't work out? I told her what I wanted to believe. That Ploy was different, that this wasn't some Bargirl situation, that we had a real connection. My mum nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She'd read the same articles I'd read, seen the same cautionary tales, but she also knew I was a grown man who'd make his own mistakes, if that's what they turned out to be. She made me promise to keep my UK bank account open and to not burn every bridge behind me. I agreed, though I had no intention of needing a backup plan. This was going to work because I needed it to work. I handed in my notice at work in month 4. My boss didn't seem surprised. Apparently I'd been checked out for a while, just going through the motions. I sold most of my stuff. The furniture that came with the flat, my car that was barely worth the trouble of keeping. Put everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a backpack. My savings weren't massive, maybe £20,000 after selling everything but in Thailand that would last for years if I was careful. I had a few freelance IT contracts lined up, enough to cover basic expenses while I figured out the rest. On paper, it looked like a solid plan. In reality, I was a man in love making decisions with his heart instead of his head. The flight back to Bangkok in July felt different from that first trip. This time, I wasn't a tourist. I was someone moving toward a new life, toward a person who was waiting for me at arrivals with a smile and a handmade welcome sign. Ploy had taken the day off from the bar to meet me, and when I saw her standing there in the crowd, something in my chest just opened up. She hugged me tight, and all the doubts and questions from the past months just evaporated. This was right. This was exactly where I was supposed to be. We took a taxi back to Jomtien, to the apartment she'd found for us. One bedroom, kitchen, living area, bathroom. Nothing fancy but clean and modern enough, with air conditioning that actually worked and a small balcony overlooking the street. 12,000 baht a month, about 300 quid. Less than a quarter of what my Manchester studio had cost. The building had a small pool, security, decent Wi-Fi. It felt like luxury compared to what I'd left behind. Ploy had already moved some of her things in clothes in the wardrobe, toiletries in the bathroom, a few decorations that made it feel lived in. Our apartment, our space, our life beginning. Those first few months were everything I'd imagined and more. Ploy would wake up before me, make coffee Thai-style thick, sweet, served over ice, and we'd sit on the balcony planning our day. She'd teach me Thai words, laughing at my terrible pronunciation. I'd work on my laptop for a few hours while she'd clean the apartment or go to the market, coming back with ingredients for dinner. She was an excellent cook. Proper Thai food, not the tourist versions I'd been eating. Som tam that made my eyes water. Pad krapao that tasted nothing like takeaway back home. Curries that were complex and rich, and made the whole apartment smell incredible. We'd spend afternoons at the beach, her teaching me to swim properly because I'd never really learned beyond splashing about. Evenings we'd ride her motorbike to different night markets, her driving while I held on behind, my arms around her waist, wind in my face, feeling more alive than I had in a decade. She'd introduced me to her friends, mostly other girls who worked in bars or restaurants, a few Thai blokes who spoke limited English but were friendly enough. They'd all congratulate me, tell me how lucky I was, what a good girl Ploy was. I felt like I'd won something, like I'd figured out a secret that most blokes back home would never discover. The marriage conversation came up naturally enough. We were lying in bed one night about 4 months after I'd arrived, and Ploy mentioned that her family kept asking about me when they'd get to meet me properly. She said in Thai culture, living together without marriage wasn't really the dumb thing, that it would be better for her reputation and mine if we made it official. She wasn't pushy about it, didn't give me an ultimatum, just presented it as something that would make sense, that would make things easier. I'd been thinking about it anyway, if I'm honest. I loved her. Simple as that. I'd wake up next to her and feel grateful. I'd watch her cooking dinner and feel settled in a way I'd never felt with Sarah or anyone else. This wasn't the desperate loneliness that had driven me to Thailand. This was actual happiness. Why wouldn't I want to make it permanent? The practical side of my brain knew we'd only been together properly for 4 months, that I didn't know her family, that I barely spoke the language. But the louder voice said that love doesn't run on a schedule, that when you know, all those cliches that turn out to be cliches because they feel true in the moment. We started planning it. Nothing fancy. Ploy said she didn't need a big ceremony, that we could do the official paperwork at the AMFA office and have a small dinner with friends afterward. I sent money to her family, upcountry sinsod, the dowry, which she explained was customary, and showed respect to her parents for raising such a good daughter. 100,000 baht, about 2.5 grand. It seemed reasonable. I'd read about blokes paying way more. Ploy had actually suggested less, but I wanted to do it properly, wanted her family to know I was serious about taking care of their daughter. We got married on a Tuesday in September at the district office in Pattaya. The actual ceremony was quick sign papers, take photos, done. Ploy wore a traditional Thai dress that made her look stunning, and I wore the one decent shirt I'd brought from England. Her friend came as a witness, and the photographer they had on site took our official photos, us standing stiff and formal in front of a Thai flag and a portrait of the king. Afterward, we went to a restaurant with maybe a dozen of Ploy's friends, and they all toasted us with sangsom and coke, everyone laughing and taking photos. Ploy's friends kept telling me how lucky I was, what a good wife she'd be. One of them, a girl named Noi who spoke good English, pulled me aside and said, "Ploy talks about you all the time, you make her very happy." I believed it completely. The honeymoon period stretched through the rest of that year. Sure, there were small adjustments. Living with anyone is different from dating them. Ploy was messier than I expected, leaving clothes everywhere, never quite putting things back where they belonged. She was glued to her phone more than I liked, always chatting online with her friends, scrolling through Facebook and TikTok for hours. But these felt like normal relationship things, not red flags. I was messy in my own ways. I worked odd hours to match UK time zones for some of my freelance contracts, which meant I was sometimes on calls at midnight or up working at dawn. She never complained, just worked around my schedule. The financial requests continued, but that seemed normal too. I was the husband now. The the provider. Her mum needed money for the water buffalo that died 15,000 baht. Her brother's motorbike broke down 10,000. The apartment landlord raised rent by 2,000 baht a month. Her phone broke, and she needed a new one, 12,000. None of it seemed unreasonable in isolation. I was still spending less per month than I had in Manchester, even with these extras. My savings were going down but slowly, and I was earning enough from freelance work to cover our basic costs. I'd convinced myself I was living the dream cheaply, that this was still the bargain life everyone had promised. Ploy stopped working at the bar about 6 months after I arrived. She said there was no point anymore since I was taking care of things, and besides, she wanted to focus on being a good wife, keeping the apartment nice, making proper meals. I encouraged this, honestly. I liked coming out of my home office to find her there. Liked not having to share her attention with drunk tourists at the bar. It felt like we were building something more serious, more committed. She was my wife, not someone who needed to serve drinks to strangers. I felt good about being able to provide that for her. We talked about visiting England, maybe for Christmas, to meet my family properly. We'd done video calls with my mum a few times. Ploy smiling and waving, saying hello in careful English, while my mum asked polite questions and tried to hide her concern. But actually going back, having Ploy meet everyone, showing them that this was real and working, that felt important. I priced out flights, started planning the trip, but every time I brought it up seriously, Ploy would find a reason to delay. It was too expensive. Her English wasn't good enough, she'd never been on a long flight and was scared. Her family needed her around for some upcoming event. There was always something, and I always accepted the explanation because pushing felt controlling, felt like I didn't trust her. Looking back now, that first year was the golden period. The time when I could still pretend everything was exactly as it seemed, when the small inconsistencies were just cultural differences or personality quirks, when the money flowing out felt like investment rather than bleeding, when her distance felt like independence rather than secrecy. I was happy, or at least I'd convinced myself I was happy, which at the time felt like the same thing. I'd message my mum saying everything was brilliant. I'd post photos on Facebook of beach sunsets and Thai food, getting likes from old friends who probably thought I'd lost my mind but were too polite to say so. I remember one night toward the end of that first year, sitting on our balcony with a beer, Ploy beside me scrolling through her phone and thinking this is it. This is what contentment feels like. Not fireworks and drama, just quiet domestic peace in the warm evening air. No grey skies, no soul-crushing commute, no loneliness. I'd escaped. I'd won. I was one of the success stories, not one of the cautionary tales. That's what I told myself as I finished my beer and went to bed next to my wife, not knowing that the foundations were already cracking beneath us, that the dream was already starting to rot from the inside out. But somewhere around the 14-month mark, things started to shift in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. The requests for money became more frequent, more urgent, less apologetic. Ploy's mother needed surgery, 30,000 baht. Her brother crashed his motorbike and needed another one, 25,000. The landlord was threatening to evict us if we didn't pay 3 months advance, 36,000. Her friend was in trouble with a loan shark, 15,000 to help out. Every week there was something new, some crisis that required immediate cash, and I found myself transferring money almost on autopilot, watching my savings account shrink faster than I'd ever planned. I started taking on more freelance work to compensate, picking up every contract I could find, working 12-hour days sometimes just to keep the money flowing. My initial £20,000 had seemed like it would last years. 18 months in, I was down to maybe 8,000, and the math wasn't adding up anymore. I tried to talk to Ploy about budgeting, about maybe her getting a job again, about cutting back on some expenses. She'd get defensive immediately, tell me I didn't understand how expensive everything was in Thailand now, that her family needed help and wasn't that what husbands did. She'd cry sometimes, accuse me of being cheap, of not caring about her family, of changing now that we were married, and I'd back down every time, apologise, transfer more money, tell myself this was just temporary. The affection dried up like the money was draining away. Ploy stopped cooking most days, saying she was tired or didn't feel well. She'd go out in the mornings and not come back until evening, vague about where she'd been. Shopping with friends, visiting her sister, running errands that seemed to take 6 hours. She was always on her phone now, and she'd changed the passcode without telling me. When I asked about it casually, she exploded, told me I was being controlling, that she had a right to privacy. that I was acting like a jealous farang who didn't trust his wife. The argument lasted 2 days of cold silence before I apologized, just to make things normal again. The sex stopped almost completely. We'd gone from multiple times a week to maybe once a month, and when it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was doing me a favor and wanted it over with quickly. She started sleeping facing away from me, moving to the far edge of the bed, getting up early, and staying up late on her phone, so we barely shared the bed at the same time. The apartment that had felt like our shared space now felt like a place where two strangers were temporarily housed. I'd come out of my office after a long day of work and find her on the couch, phone in hand, barely acknowledging my presence. We'd eat dinner in silence, her scrolling, me pretending to watch whatever was on the television. I started drinking more to cope. Nothing dramatic at first, just a couple of beers with lunch to take the edge off, then a few more in the afternoon, then a bottle of wine with dinner. Then whiskey after Ploy went to bed, sitting alone on the balcony, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. I'd message my mum less frequently because I didn't want to admit things weren't perfect. I'd stopped posting on Facebook entirely because keeping up the illusion felt exhausting. My old mates from Manchester had stopped reaching out after I'd made excuses too many times about why I couldn't video call, or why I was always too busy to chat. The isolation was complete. I was in a foreign country where I barely spoke the language, married to a woman who seemed to resent my existence, working all hours to fund a lifestyle that was making me miserable, and I had no one to talk to about it. I'd read things online sometimes, stories from other expats about being scammed or used, and I'd think that's not me, my situation is different, Ploy isn't like that. But the voice saying that got quieter every month while the doubt got louder. I tried to talk to her properly one night after I'd had a few drinks, sat her down and said we needed to discuss our future, our finances, our relationship. She listened for maybe 2 minutes before turning it around completely, started crying, saying I'd changed, that I used to be kind and generous and now I was constantly stressed and suspicious. Said her family was struggling and I was being selfish, that this was Thai culture and I didn't understand it because I was Farang. Said maybe she'd made a mistake marrying me if I was going to be like this. By the end of the conversation, I was the one apologizing again, promising to try harder, transferring another 10,000 baht to prove I wasn't the bad guy she was making me out to be. My friends back home had given up on me entirely by this point. The last time I'd spoken to my mate James, he the 500th asked outright if everything was okay, said I seemed different, seemed stressed. I'd gotten defensive, told him everything was fine, that he wouldn't understand because he'd never left England. He backed off, but I could hear the concern in his voice, and I'd avoided his calls after that because I couldn't handle the questions I didn't want to answer. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I'd been working a morning shift for a UK client, finished early, around 2 in the afternoon normally. I'd text Ploy to let her know I was done for the day, but my phone had died and I couldn't be bothered to charge it before heading out of my office. I walked into our bedroom to grab a charger and found Ploy in our bed with another man. Not caught in the act exactly, but close enough. They were clothed, but the situation was obvious. Him sitting on the edge of the bed, her next to him, both of them jumping up when I walked in like they'd been electrocuted. The next 10 minutes were chaos. The bloke grabbed his shoes and basically ran out of the apartment without saying a word. Ploy started talking immediately. Too fast, mixing Thai and English, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that he was just a friend, that they were just talking. I stood there feeling like I was watching this happen to someone else, like I'd stepped into a different apartment in a different life. My brain couldn't process it. This was my wife. In our bed, with another man. In the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, when I finally found words, I asked the only question that mattered. Who is he? She wouldn't answer at first, just kept crying and saying I didn't understand. I asked again, louder this time, and something in my voice must have told her the line was over because she just collapsed. Sat on the edge of the bed and told me everything, or at least a version of everything that was probably still edited but closer to the truth than anything I'd heard in 18 months. She'd never stopped working. Not as a bartender, she'd quit that part, but as a freelancer. That's what they call it here, freelancing. Bar girls who work independently, meeting clients through lineup, through websites, through connections. She'd been doing it the whole time we were together, the whole time we were married. Some clients were regulars, guys she'd see once a week or once a month. Some were one-time tourists. The money I'd been sending for family emergencies, some of it did go to her family, but a lot of it went to supporting her lifestyle, to helping her Thai boyfriend upcountry, to keeping up appearances with her friends who all knew what she was doing and thought I was either complicit or stupid. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, though that gutted me. It was how matter-of-fact she was about it once the truth started coming out. She told me this was normal, that lots of Thai women did this, that plenty of Farang husbands knew about these arrangements and accepted them because this is Thailand, this is how things work here. She said I was naive for thinking a girl like her would be with a guy like me for love alone, that I wasn't rich enough or handsome enough or young enough for that fairy tale. She said she did care about me in her way, that I was kind and easy to live with, but that she had to think about her future, about her family, about security. I moved out 3 days later, packed my 2 suitcases, left everything else, found a cheap studio in a different part of Pattaya. The marriage was over in every way that mattered, though the legal paperwork would take months to sort out because Thai divorce law is complicated when you're foreign. I'd burned through most of my savings, had no real job to go back to in England, and felt like the most pathetic fool who'd ever bought a one-way ticket chasing a fantasy. The weeks after were dark. I won't pretend otherwise. I drank too much, barely ate, couldn't focus on work. I'd lie awake in my new apartment listening to the sounds of the city and wondering how I'd gotten everything so wrong. How I'd ignored every red flag, every warning sign, every piece of advice. How I'd confused loneliness with love. How I'd let myself believe that geographic change could fix emotional problems. How I'd been so desperate to escape my old life that I'd walked straight into a worse one. But slowly, painfully, clarity started to come. I began working through it, talking to other expats who'd been through similar situations, reading the stories I'd previously dismissed as not applying to me. I started to understand the game I'd been playing without knowing the rules. Ploy wasn't a monster. She was doing what she'd learned to do to survive in a system that commodified relationships between foreign men and Thai women. She was playing her part in an economy that existed long before I arrived and would continue long after I left. I'd just been naive enough to think I was special, that my situation was different, that love could exist outside those economic realities. I don't hate her now. That surprises me, but it's true. I pity her, actually. She's still out there doing the same thing with other men, probably telling them the same stories, collecting the same emergency payments, building the same false intimacy that feels real until it doesn't. And there will be other Dannies, other lonely blokes from cold countries who think they've found something special, who'll ignore the same warnings I ignored, who'll learn the same painful lessons. I'm rebuilding now, still in Thailand because going back to England feels like admitting defeat, and I'm not quite ready for that. Working properly again, saving money, keeping my head down. I've met other expats who've been through similar things, and there's a strange comfort in knowing you're not uniquely stupid, that this story has been told 1,000 times with different names and faces, but the same basic arc. Some of them found real relationships afterward. Some went home. Some stayed and accepted Thailand for what it is, rather than what they wanted it to be. The money's gone, the relationship's gone, the dream's gone. But I'm still here, still standing, still learning. I can't change what happened, but I can warn the next guy. I can tell my story and maybe, just maybe, someone will read it and make a different choice. Or at least go in with their eyes open instead of closed like mine were. That's all I've got really. I'm not the first and I won't be the last. But I survived it, and I'm wiser now than I was when I stepped off that plane, thinking I'd cracked the code to happiness. Turns out the code was a lot more complicated than I thought, and the price of learning it was higher than I planned to pay. Welcome back. This is your host, closing out Danny's story. And look, I want to be clear about something. Not every relationship between a Western man and a Thai woman is a scam. There are genuine love stories, real partnerships, couples who build happy lives together. This isn't about demonizing Thai women or painting all expats as victims. But Danny's story represents a pattern that's repeated itself across Thailand for decades. And it's worth examining honestly. What happened to Danny happens because of a collision between fantasy and reality, between what lonely men want to believe and what some women have learned to provide in exchange for financial security. It's about men who come to Thailand looking for escape, for meaning, for love, for something they couldn't find at home, and they're vulnerable because of that need. And there are women who've learned to recognize that vulnerability and monetize it, not because they're evil, but because they're surviving in an economy where their youth and beauty are assets with a limited shelf life. The warning signs were all there for Danny, the constant money requests, the vagueness about where she went and what she did, the locked phone, the resistance to meeting his family or building a life beyond Thailand. the friends who all worked in the same industry, the too good to be true feeling of being loved so completely, so quickly. But he ignored them because acknowledging them would have meant admitting his dream was a transaction, and that truth was too painful to accept until it forced itself into his bedroom on a Tuesday afternoon. If you're watching this and thinking about making a similar move, I'm not here to tell you not to go. Thailand is a beautiful country. There are genuine relationships to be found, but go with your eyes open. Don't let loneliness make your decisions. Don't confuse being needed with being loved. Don't ignore red flags because the dream feels too good to question. And for God's sake, don't marry someone after 4 months and start sending money for endless family emergencies without verification. And if you're already in a situation like Danny's, if you're watching this and recognizing yourself in his story, it's not too late to step back and reassess. Talk to other expats. Get advice from people who aren't financially dependent on you. Keep your support network back home alive, even when it's uncomfortable. Protect your finances. And remember that real love doesn't require constant financial proof, doesn't isolate you from friends and family, doesn't leave you feeling anxious and depleted. Danny's story isn't unique, but it is honest, and there's value in that honesty. He's not the villain here. Neither is Ploy, really. They're both products of a system that creates these situations over and over. But you don't have to be the next chapter in that story. You can learn from Danny's mistakes without having to live through them yourself. Thanks for watching Bargirl Baddies. If this story resonated with you, or if you've been through something similar, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you know someone who's thinking about making a big move for love, maybe share this with them. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is a cautionary tale they're willing to hear. We'll see you in the next one.